We are joined now by Robert Mays of the Athletic Football Show. Robert, overall, let's just talk a little bit about this coaching staff that's been put together in Atlanta. What are your overall impressions just right off the bat, and kind of what changes do you think can be made right away with the staff in place?
The Zach Robinson thing is very intriguing to me because if you look at offensive coordinator searches around the NFL, I live in Chicago, he was a name on that list. And a lot of teams balanced proven guys who've done it before with guys like him. And if you were going to bucket the unproven, this is their first shot guys, he was the name that most intrigued me. Where he comes from, he was a part, if you look at what the Rams offense was from 2000, even 2001 to now, they've undergone a pretty significant evolution. The amount of drop back game stuff that's changed, the structure of things is very different than it was in 2017 when Sean McVay got there. And the fact that Zach has been a part of that evolution, he's seen kind of where the bodies are buried, where the problems are with certain aspects of that offense, I find that very interesting because problem solving is the name of the game when you're one of these coordinators, especially if you've never done it before. So the fact that he had a hand in how that thing was shaped and just the way that the trajectory of how the offense has gone, I think that's really, really interesting and really important.
Yeah. Something that I talked to Zach about when he first got to Atlanta was I was like, it's very obvious to me that even though you've only been a coach in the league for a short amount of time in comparison to some of these other longtime assistant coaches, coordinators, I was like, the quarterbacks that you worked with, like, had a hand in getting ready to go out and play, honestly, sometimes within 24 hours of getting to be on the team, a week of, getting to LA. That, to me, was something that was very important because of the opportunity the Falcons have before them in terms of what they want to do at the quarterback position. How do you see kind of his work with guys at quarterbacks at various different points in their career with kind of different skill sets, evolving to what the Falcons need to do at the quarterback position
It's hugely important because the offense is always going to be, at a certain point, an expression of the quarterback play. You can have a certain system or a certain set of ideas that you want to tap into, but ultimately you're going to have to do what the quarterback does well and what the quarterback is comfortable with. So having gone through that process multiple different times with multiple different styles of quarterbacks, it's nothing but a good thing because who knows? We have no idea who the quarterback for the Falcons is going to be.
Yeah, no clue.
Speaking of the trigger word, what should the Falcons do with the quarterback situation?
I honestly don't know because my biggest thing with this is there are two competing, not even competing, but there are two timelines at play here. You can look at the Falcons as year 4 of the Terry Fontenot era, or you can look at the Falcons as year 1 of the Raheem Morris era. So if it's year 4, it seems like there's a little bit of urgency there, right?
Yes.
So you have the financial flexibility to sign somebody in free agency. If you wanted to go get a Kirk Cousins and be competitive right away, that is available to you in a way it isn't with some of these other teams that need quarterbacks. And if you are in year 4 and there is kind of an urgency to win now, do you want the stopgap microwaved option? If it's year 1, and there isn't that sort of urgency and conversations with ownership and whoever's in charge, you guys take your time. If you want to develop somebody, if you want to go that route, we're totally fine with that. The answer they land on, to me, says a lot about where the organization sees itself and how quickly the Falcons think they can be competitive in the NFC.
That's a great point. And I guess, it all depends on what quarterback they're essentially wanting. Because I was going to ask you, what do you think a Zach Robinson offense in Atlanta could look like? But we don't have the biggest piece, and we don't even have a name at this point. So how do you kind of even, when you're looking at what Zach Robinson could do in Atlanta, how do you weigh that in your own head?
It's hard to know because how much of the Rams offense over the last couple of years was an expression of Matthew Stafford's skill set. Where Sean McVay comes from, it's a lot of under center, play action, run game tied to the pass game. They transitioned away from that over the last few years. If you look at Rams play action rates in 2019 compared with Rams play action rates in 2023, drastically different. But is that because you had a quarterback that you feel comfortable saying, we're going to drop back and throw it 45 times? We think we're comfortable with your mental acumen, how much you can handle. If you go with let's say J.J. McCarthy, whoever the 8th overall pick is, and you can't put that on him, you want some, I call them bumpers, like when you're bowling. You want to put some bumpers on the quarterback. You want it to be a little bit more structured, a little bit more play action. Does his skill set fit that version of a Rams-like offense? So not knowing exactly who they want to be, I think, lends to some questions about what type of quarterback they ultimately chase.
With the pieces in play already on offense, Do you think one way would work better than the other?
Not necessarily, because I think that the pieces that they have are good in either direction. Like,
okay.
It's an easier jump to the play-action heavy offense because that's what they were. Right. So you have an offensive line that's a run-heavy offensive line. They're used to. I mean, I think the Falcons led the league in play action percentage each of the last 2 seasons. So those are the things they're used to doing. So that's the quickest jump. But in terms of the skill position talent, I think the goal when you take guys in the top 10 is that they're flexible between whatever offensive system you want to have.
So we're literally waiting on the quarterback.
That's where we are.
All right.
Do you think it's something as, I mean, simple is not the right word, because we all know how evaluating quarterbacks is the toughest thing to do in the league. I mean, across sports, in my opinion. For you, is it something as simple as if the Falcons get the quarterback position right? And I've asked different people this. If the Falcons get the quarterback position right with the talent that they already have on the roster, is it a situation where they can go from a middle-of-the-pack 7-10 team to being something where you are looking at a playoff berth?
Potentially. I think that there's still going to be questions about the quality of the offensive play caller and what the offensive system looks like, solely because we've never seen it before.
Right.
Zach Robinson is the bet I would have made in this group of offensive coordinator candidates. The guys who've never done it before, among all of those guys, he's the one I would have wanted to see get a chance. So I have faith that this can work, but there's still enough unknown quantities involved here beyond the quarterback that I think I want to see a couple more boxes checked before I'm willing to say that.
Makes sense.
It's all new. I mean, the head coach is new.
Yeah.
We haven't even mentioned the defensive coordinator. Offensive coordinator is new.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have a brand new quarterback. Like, it's a clean slate.
There's no doubt. And I think that if you look at the type of defense they ran last year, what Ryan Nielsen has done in the past, a lot of big bodies, you're pushing the pocket. This isn't a team that has a lot of traditional explosive pass rushers.
Right.
So there are elements personnel-wise, even on that side of the ball, that probably still need to be answered. And I don't want to discount how good of a job Ryan Nielsen did last year.
Absolutely not.
Because if you're looking at the trajectory of this defense, it's very tempting to say, oh, well, look at the pieces they added and what Jesse Bates was, and it's only going to keep going up and up and up. I think that would be discounting how good of a job he did to just assume that they're going to keep getting better on that side of the ball rather than plateauing or even taking a small step back.
I agree.
You know, Jimmy Lake is somebody who, he's had play calling experience, head coaching experience at the college level. How do you see what he's going to do, maybe what he did with Washington translating to essentially what you could do with this defense?
What I'm so interested in is that Raheem specifically, right? He doesn't come from one defensive background.
No.
So if you
so many.
You have a conversation with Raheem, and I've always enjoyed talking to him about this in the past. The stops he's gone to, he played in a Jim Haslett. He coached in a Jim Haslett blitz-heavy defense. He coached in the heyday of the Tampa 2 and like what they were doing with the Bucs. If you look at what they've done with the Rams, that's completely different. So I'm wondering, beyond Jimmy Lake's ability as a defensive coordinator, what's the defense even going to look like?
Right, yeah.
Now that he's able to start over again, Raheem is, outside of that Rams system, because when he got there, it was all about continuity.
Yeah, right.
He was the only new piece on that defensive staff after Brandon Staley left. And the process of him learning their defense rather than the other way around, I think allowed them to really have a lot of success in LA. But removed from that, when you're now dealing with a pool of players who have no familiarity in that system, do you still live in that system? So I don't know even what it's going to look like, and maybe that is an expression of the players in a way we're not really thinking about enough right now. So there are so many questions about what this team is going to look like on both sides of the ball, their identity, who they want to be. I think that people will be happy with the answers, but I think it's going to be a somewhat murkier trip to get there than people are giving it credit for.
To wrap up, just you say you hope that people are happier with the overall product in the end. But right now there is a lot of unknowns. So what makes you feel confident that there is hope to tap into if you're this fan base?
There was a lot of talent, underlying talent on the roster. I think that the way that they built it over the last couple of years, I understood a lot of the steps that they took. It was always going to be ugly early on. To Arthur Blank's credit and to Thomas Dimitroff's credit, they were really aggressive in wanting to win football games near the end of the Matt Ryan era. Untangling that financially was always going to be a process.
Yeah.
It took 2 years.
Yeah.
And now year 3, you make a push forward for the first time, and the aggressive moves they've made from a personnel addition standpoint have mostly worked, right? If you look at the skill position talent that they have, if you look at what Jesse Bates is, the swings they've taken from a roster building perspective have really lined up very well so far. So I think it's more about tweaking the dials and about having just a more crystallized vision in some areas of the coaching perspective and like what you want the awesome offensive system to look like. But a lot of teams that are starting over with the head coach, it's more of a full-scale rebuild, it's more of a full-scale reset than this looks like. So I think that's why there's still room for optimism and reason for optimism if you're a Falcons fan.
Great point to end on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, absolutely.
We are joined by Nate Tice of the Athletic Football Show. And Nate, I have to ask first and foremost, what were your kind of overall thoughts of this specific coaching staff being put together in Atlanta with Jimmy Lake as a DC, as Zach Robinson as an OC, Raheem Morris as a head coach? What intrigued you about this staff?
Well, Raheem, first off, coach is one of the most unique personalities, unique in a good way, unique personalities in the NFL, and one of the best people persons in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I think, as a lot of people are learning right now, it's a lot of head coaching right now is CEO and managing people and communicating to people. Of course, everyone's using Dan Campbell as an example, but this has always been a thing. And I think Raheem's the epitome of it. He's been in a lot of different offenses, a lot of different defenses. He's coached both sides. So I think, first and foremost, that's great. The head guy's good. But even just going into the OC and getting a guy from the Shanahan tree, and that's kind of the meta right now, in vogue right now, and I think that's just a good thing to do. So I really like the staff. I figured that Raheem would be a guy that could put one together that is connected, a lot of quality guys. So I like it, and I like it a lot, and I feel like they're sitting in a really good spot.
Nice.
That was definitely like the first box to check this offseason. Now the second one is the quarterback.
Yes.
1A, 1B.
Yeah. 1A, 1B. You have to do the first one first.
I don't know if people ever said those are important, the head coach and the quarterback. I'm not sure.
Groundbreaking stuff, right?
Yeah, so, quarterback, you guys are in an interesting spot at 8. So that's what I'm trying to figure out as well.
Aren't we all?
As a guy that was a defender of Desmond Ridder, and I actually did like, and I still think he'll have a nice career as maybe a spot starter or backup type, and I like Desmond a lot, but that's the thing, is that it's a quarterback league, and when it's a results-based league, and we might like them and everything, but it's like you still got to have results. And I think this is a unique opportunity because of this draft for having what I view as two legitimate elite quarterback prospects in Drake May and Caleb Williams, and then some other interesting guys, J.J. McCarthy, Jaden Daniels, of course. But at pick 8, it's like, all right, you're kind of in the strike zone.
Yeah.
You're kind of outside of it, and you also have some money to spend, and there's a couple intriguing free agent quarterback options. I know Kirk Cousins is going to be the prettiest girl at the dance, I think, for the next month or two. But, I think they have a few options, which I think is always fun. Options is a very fun O word. Yeah.
How do you think, according to what direction that they go in, whether it be free agency with a Kirk Cousins or the draft or a trade even, how do you see that changing kind of what happens in 2024 and the expectations that you have for this entire organization?
Right. Well, I feel like they want to push, meaning because I think when you have this young talent, when you drafted the Kyle Pitts of the world, the Drake Londons of the world, Bijan, all these guys have that offensive line essentially all under contract, all of them coming back, I believe, this year. And you have some great defensive pieces, I think. That's not all the way complete, but to me, that's like, drop the quarterback in and, maybe we got a stew going, kind of like that. Like we're very close to that. So even though they're picking 8, it's not like it's a full-blown rebuild. I think it's a one more thing and let's go, especially in that division in the NFC South right now with the Saints reconfiguring whatever they're doing, the Panthers and where they're at still in their thing, and then the Bucs kind of in a crossroads here, and they have questions at quarterback too because I don't know if they're bringing Baker back or not. So it's like, to me, it's like, and the NFC's kind of loose and open. It's like push. So I feel like they're in a great spot to do that.
The word that they keep using is this whole idea of aggression, being aggressive, and that's exactly what I think the expectation is for this offseason, because like what you said, it's one of those things that you change one piece and maybe this thing turns out different than it has the last 3 years.
Look at the Texans.
Right, exactly.
They get Stroud, and I was high on Stroud, and I liked D'Amico Ryans, but I was like, playoff team, okay. Might win 7 games and everything, and also they're making the playoffs or win the division. It's like, that's how it's NFL. Not for long in a good way, not for long in a bad way too, but it's like things can change so quick, especially if you just get the right chemistry, the right people in the building. It's like, there's an opportunity to do that right now.
Let's say hypothetically that the Falcons go trade or free agency route with the quarterback. They get someone in that essentially you expect to be the guy day one. What do you do at number 8? What are some names or some areas of need that you see this team prioritizing at that spot?
There's not a lot of high-end defensive talent, as far as high-end being like a true top 10 blue blood. This guy is going to get 12 sacks on the defense front. I do think there's some interesting corners. Terry and Arnold from Alabama is one. Pairing him with A.J. Terrell, like to me, that's really fun.
Yeah.
So that's one that like, okay, maybe going there, like also trading back, maybe just including a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like I did a mock draft recently, and I gave him another wide receiver, and that was kind of just for fun.
I mean, it's also
like,
kind of par for the course for this regime.
And it's also a draft where there's 3 legit top 10 graded wide receivers that I think are needle movers. Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, of course, Malik Neighbors from LSU, and then Roman Dunze from Washington. And then there's others that are really interesting. But it's like, okay, we can maybe drop that in. And then if you want to go defensive front, I actually think Dallas Turner, who from Alabama, who I have graded a little lower than a top 10 pick, but actually I love him and Raheem Morris's defense because how he uses that specific kind of position. It's like he can drop into coverage, he can rush the passer. I never think he's going to be like a 12-sack guy, but like a nice 8-sack guy that does a lot of things really, really well. Coverage, plays a run, just a very good player. And like I feel like they just keep needing very good players. So you can't get picky. You just get the best players.
Yeah, and that's something that they've done for years. It's like, I mean, they've seen Kyle Pitts, Drake London,
don't overthink it.
Bijan Robinson. Who's the best one out there at the time that you're picking?
That's it.
So that's kind of been their bread and butter these last 3 years.
And the Lions who got ragged on last year because they went Jahmyr Gibbs and they went linebacker Jack Campbell, and I think what people are realizing too is linebacker is a position that there's not a lot out there anymore. So now, even a month after that happened, I went on a different podcast, but I was kind of like, my hot take is I didn't mind their draft. It wasn't like I loved their draft. It was like I didn't mind it.
Yeah.
But they took the best players.
They did. Yeah.
And then in the second round, they went Sam Laporta, a tight end, and then Brian Branch, slot player. And all those guys contributed, not just like a little bit, like actual all-pro caliber players. And that's it. Just take the best players, and we'll figure it out. If you have good coaches, they'll figure it out.
Yeah. You did pick Rome for that mock draft.
I did.
What was it about him that you think would have benefit the Falcons?
I actually love his synergy with Drake London. I think those two, they could do in and out stuff together. They're both physical. I compare Rome to Chris Godwin from the Bucs, where he checks every box. Like, he can block, he can win downfield, he can win contested catches, but he's a good route runner. He can win underneath, he can create yards after the catch but also again, he blocks. And I don't know if you know this, but the Shanahan offenses, they love, and even our previous regime in Atlanta, they love receivers that can block because it opens up the run game. Hey, we also have Bijan. Hey, we also have Tyler Algier. That just also works with that. So even if it's a skilled guy, it's one of the other guys on the field that's helping out everybody else.
You talk about this Atlanta Falcons team maybe needing one piece here or there to kind of get what they want to go. Is there a notion in your mind that if they get the quarterback position right, that they get there?
Yeah, I do. I think they're closer than a lot of other NFC teams right now. I think Packers are very interesting because they're so young. Rams as well, but they're also kind of this weird crossroads of old and young. And why I'm saying all that is that I think it's open. It's that if you do hit it and you do hit that quarterback, it's like, that's a double-digit win season. And once you get the playoffs, you don't know. The Packers almost beat the 49ers and made it to the conference championship game. No one would have thought that either. It's like if you just get that guy, that needle mover at that position, or even just good play at that position, it changes everything. And I think just the other pieces are just they're set up to just really ascend.
Yeah. Something that's come up in a couple of conversations that we've had this week is this idea of doubling down, where you go after a quarterback in trade, free agency market, and then you draft one, whether it be at number 8 or you move down and maybe get one later in the first round. What do you kind of think about that idea? And is there kind of a pairing that you would look at and be like, that would be a fun pairing to watch?
The hat on the hat thing, I don't know. I always, because it's just you only have so many resources, and it's kind of like, okay, only one quarterback can play. Even there is benefits to, grooming a guy and all that. Right. I also just don't think maybe McCarthy from Michigan is one, but I also think he's going to go higher than that just because I think certain coaches, including maybe your guys' offense coordinator, will like his skill set. So even if I have him graded as like a second-round guy, quarterbacks get inflated. And you just don't it could be 24, but it also could be 9.
Yeah.
I just don't know, 11. So it's kind of hard to find that pairing, but I like it if you have a succession plan that actually makes sense, or if you get some raw toolsy guy. Like the Titans a few years ago tried to draft Malik Willis, and they're like, and maybe not the best situation to grow a guy and all that. And so maybe it just doesn't work out, but always having that succession plan, always having something, because as we saw last year, I think it was the most starting quarterbacks ever in the season because of injuries. That's going to, I mean, even in Atlanta, back and forth. Well, that was different stuff. But every position, every team was going through 2 guys. So I'm not saying it's the worst idea, but also maybe where the Falcons are at, it's like, I'll replenish elsewhere.
No, I always love getting different opinions on what people think for sure.
If you don't want to double down, do you lean one way more than the other, free agency or draft?
I think where they're at, if they're not moving, free agency.
Okay.
If they can go up, I think Drake May and Caleb Williams are prizes, like true 1A, 1B guys that are true deserving of top 2 picks. Not like, there's this guy, I guess, like that. They deserve it. But after that, I'm a little dicey. I just broke down Jane Daniels for Yahoo, and I dove into him, more concerns I had, and so that was like, okay,
interesting.
But would I want that? Like, is that what I want to build around? Because you might miss. That's one in the hand, 2 in the bush kind of thing. So I think if they got a Kirk Cousins or even somebody like, I don't even know, Jacoby Brissett, something like that, or trade for Justin Fields or something of that, like that is what I prefer because of just how the makeup of the rest of the team is too.
There's a lot of unknowns with this team, and I mean across the league, but definitely with this team. When it comes to expectations that you maybe have for the Falcons in 2024, what do those expectations look like, even knowing that there are significant unknowns about what Zach Robinson's offense is going to look like? Who's going to be under center? I mean, there are these big fundamental questions, but is there reason to still be hopeful?
Yeah, I do. And also just their messaging. Like you said, they're being aggressive, and that's what makes me think that they're going to find some answer. And someone, Raheem comes out and says, we need better quarterback plays. All right, got it. Got it. I know what you guys are thinking.
It's like there's no secret.
Yeah, so and I kind of like that. For me, as a neutral guy that just has to read between the lines, I'm like, I don't have to read between anything. This is great. It's right there.
One answer.
It's got an exclamation point on it. We're good. So I do think there's a lot of optimism. I thought, how that defense played last year and just they had more to them than I even thought. I thought they were well coached. So it was like, okay, we got more pieces here. They hit on some free agent signings, I thought, the guys they all brought up from the Saints and all that. Yeah. So it's like the defense was a big surprise to me because I was like, they might be 18th best. And it was like a legit top 12, top 10 defense in all the metrics I look at. So that makes me more optimistic of where they're at, because I think the offense has those weapons. I'm so high on Drake London. I'm so high on Bijan. And even Kyle Pitts coming back from the MCL stuff. It's like he still has talent. He's still 23 years old.
Right, yeah.
That's why I keep trying to yell at people. It's like he's so young. Just give it time.
Right, yeah.
And like those flashes, that's why not a lot of teams have that high-end talent. And so that's why it's just filling out the rest of the gaps to get it there.
Yeah, doing some tweaks. I mean, it's a long offseason.
It's a long offseason. There's
a lot that's going to happen, but that's a good note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. That was great.
We're joined here by Lance Zierlein of NFL.com. And Lance, you said something very intriguing to us before we started recording. You said that this Falcons team and where it is in 2024 is one of the most intriguing teams in all the league. Tell us a little bit about why you made that declaration.
Well, I mean, you've got a new coach in Raheem Morse, and Raheem was kind of the hotshot young coach coming up, and I think he got a head coaching job probably before he was ready for it. But it's never stopped people from, loving him as a coach. I think he's very, very talented. So now he steps into a head coaching role with more life experience, more game experience. I think that's exciting. I think the fact that you have, a tight end who I'm waiting to break out because I think he's a special talent. So now we're going to get a little different look on the offensive side. Drake London, has been a little up and down. You've got Bijan Robinson, who I think is a very special running back, and now you're at the 8th pick. It's kind of, I don't know what to expect. I don't know if you'll look at another wide receiver. You're going to look for a playmaker. You're going to look at quarterback, or you're going to look to trade up. Would you look to trade back? I think Atlanta can go in multiple positions, and then I think the specter of Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields has a legitimate chance of being in consideration for the Falcons. I think it would make a lot of sense. He started his college career in Georgia before he transferred to Ohio State. You've got a quarterback who might be able to bring some of those ingredients like London and Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts together and assimilate it into a more cohesive offensive unit. I just think I don't know what the Falcons are going to do, but I think that they're going to be one of the linchpins of how the draft goes, depending on what they do at quarterback and then with the draft.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I want to stick with the Justin Fields conversation for just a second. And, Zach Robinson is the OC coming from the Sean McVay coaching tree. And how do you see that marrying with a talent like Justin Fields? Because I know there are some people that kind of see that as a butting of heads to a certain degree, but what do you see?
So I think that we have to be careful about being so
rigid.
Yeah, exactly. With our ideology of, because I watched Mike Shanahan and Kyle Shanahan, who had RG3, and I thought, okay, Robert Griffin III does not fit this offense. And then they changed their offense. Kyle Shanahan changed what he did offensively. And all those guys from that Shanahan tree have seen that. In Houston, we have Bobby Slowick do some things differently with C.J. Stroud that he had done that you had seen from San Francisco. And so I think yes, in theory, you're right. It's not a great, the levels passing style. That's what Chicago's getting now with their new offense coordinator. And I don't know if that's a great fit for Justin Fields, but I also think good offensive coordinators and good offensive minds can kind of tailor make their offense according to a quarterback's strength. So I wouldn't be too worried about the at one point, offensive schemes there was a very rigid definition of what it is.
Yeah.
Now with so many players coming from the 7-on-7 circuit and everything's out of shotgun, and there's been so many hybrid type of players that I think now it's really a case of, hey, let's find the talent and let's work our players around the talent and work our offense around the talent.
Yeah, the most successful coaches are the ones that evolve.
You have to.
As the game does.
Yeah, you have to. And it's a lot of times the younger coaches, frankly.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's best for the Falcons to bring in someone who already has live NFL experience, or to go the draft route and bring in someone brand new?
That's a tough question. That's one of the questions I read. It's one of the reasons I think they're intriguing is you can go find your quarterback of the future. Like, let's just say they went after Kirk Cousins, right? If they were to do that. Well, right away, your passing game would be much better. Right away, your offense would be much better. But for how long? Are you just putting a long-term bridge on that? Is this a more long-term Band-Aid option of 2 or 3 years? If you go with Justin Fields, he's young enough to where he could be an answer for a long time. If you draft a quarterback, then you have the mold, you have clay that you can mold, and that's even better. But do you win right away? They don't have the game experience, and more than likely you're getting the fourth quarterback off the board. So, are you okay with the fourth quarterback? Are you okay with that quarterback needing 1 or 2 years to really grow? Because by then, Kyle Pitts is on second contract. You got a decision to make with him. You're closer to decision-making time with Bijan Robinson. So the way I look at it is I'd almost rather have a guy with game experience or somebody I think is game ready in the draft so that we can hit the ground running with these unique offensive pieces and try to get the most out of that offense while we can.
Do you think that according to what they do based upon whether it's free agency, trade, the draft, that it changes the way that you look at the 2024 Falcons and the expectations that you have for them in the short term, depending upon the level of experience that the quarterback has?
Yes, I do think that. I think when you have, it's not a great division, but it's a division that Tampa was better than people expected. The Saints at any point have the talent to be better than you expect. Carolina's Carolina. We'll see what they do. It's not looking good now, but they've hit a reset, and we'll see how Bryce Young does in year 2. But if the Falcons get a quarterback with pro experience, I think the expectations rise a little bit.
Yes.
The problem is if you get the young quarterback, it doesn't rise in the short term. But no one is – Raheem Morris didn't come here to win a championship in his first year. There's an understanding. Arthur Blank wants to see better growth. He wants better success. I don't blame him. He's waited a long time. However, you still have a chance to build into a championship. You can never lose sight of that. Falcons are not a team that needs to be in win-now mode. So, yeah, you can be better in the short term. But at the same time, if you do go the way of the draft, as long as your evaluation is good and as long as your development is good, you have a chance to build very, very quickly. I cover the Texans. They were atrocious the last 3 years.
I know, yeah.
And now they've got $60-some-odd million worth of cap space, another first-round pick, and they've got a star in C.J. Stroud who was not the first pick. They've got a young burgeoning star from the third round and Tank Dell. So it can happen. Turnarounds can happen very, very quickly. You don't have to panic. But at the same time, if you want to take advantage of a weaker division, maybe you do go with a younger quarterback like Justin Fields, who still has a lot of football left to play.
It seems like he's a little bit of the best of both worlds in this situation.
He is, and he can, listen, he helps your running game. There's no way around it. He's not as good a passer, but when Justin Fields is on the play, you can move the chains, and you have a chance to hit explosive plays. And the league is based on explosive plays. How many explosive plays can you get? You don't have to It's not one of these 14-play drives anymore. Hey, we need chunk plays. We need 15 yards, 23 yards. And Justin doesn't always do that with his arm, but can do it with his arm. He's getting better. He's still a developmental prospect. So I think there's a lot of value for him potentially with the Falcons because of the talent that surrounds him.
Yeah. Last question for you before we let you go. When you look at what the Falcons' needs are at this current juncture, and let's say they do go after a quarterback in free agency or a trade, whatever, Kirk Cousins, Justin Fields, what would you do at number 8 overall? What do you think fits for that hypothetical?
Well, I think that's where you start looking at. I mean, that's the earliest I would start looking at cornerback. It's probably the earliest I would start looking at offensive tackle, and those are talented players at that position. But for me, I still think I might look at wide receiver because sooner rather than later, Drake London's going to be gone, and if you don't go with the quarterback, if you decide to punt on quarterback early, or if you went with a veteran quarterback of some sort, I think adding, and I hate that the Falcons have just built everything from the outside in, like you need to build the trenches, but at the same time, if you got a chance to get one of these top 3 wide receivers, I think they're special players. And after that, though, man, I'm spending money and draft capital on defensive fronts, on pass rush. I know they try to get the rush right. Hasn't always worked. You got to get rush, and you got to bolster the offensive line. So I don't really think they can make a mistake at 8. I think that whether they trade up, trade back, or sit there, I actually think the Falcons are in a pretty good position in this year's draft.
All the way intriguing. We love it. And long offseason ahead, but we'll see how it goes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.